Thank you again, everyone, for being with us today. And we are excited to have 5 wonderful speakers with us. And we will start with Lynette.
I'm Lynette from the Singapore International Foundation, or SIF. I'm here to share with you our experience in harnessing technology for inclusiveness in volunteering before and during the pandemic, and what our programs might look like in the new normal. I'm also looking forward to learning from you. First, a little bit about us for context. The SIF is an international cooperation agency. All our programs are designed to do 3 things: connect, collaborate, change. We bring people from diverse communities together to collaborate on projects that deliver on positive change. If you like, we create networks of social impact in 4 focus areas of the arts, business, education, and healthcare. Volunteer cooperation, similar to what many of you do, is a key program of the SIF. Inclusiveness in volunteering towards both local communities and volunteers has always been an important aspect for us at the SIF. Does technology promote inclusiveness? We believe it certainly does. The 4th industrial revolution is underway. Smartphones, social media, and a hyper-connected people have been transforming how we live, work, and play, including powering movements of change. Think Arab Spring and Greta Thunberg. How then can we harness these forces for good? How can we tap into the power of digital networks to better deliver on international cooperation? 10 years ago, in 2011, we hypothesized that stories can inspire people to take action, and that in the online space, 90% of digital natives wanted to do good, but didn't know how or where to start. Here in the digital world was a community hitherto untapped. Thus, we created Our Better World, SIF digital storytelling platform. Our Better World, or OBW, tells stories of people and nonprofits doing good across Asia and who needed support, including volunteers. We tell their stories to inspire the people online to take action. Last year, Our Better World hit over 32 million online views. It has a community size of over 755,000, with the majority from the global south. Anyone with internet access can take action. Our Better World provided a unique and inclusive approach by bringing together online and offline communities, fostering self-serve volunteering, and raising awareness of how volunteers could contribute within and across communities. To illustrate, I would like to share a story from the Refugees, Displaced but Not Discouraged series, a school for refugees by refugees. There are about 14,000 refugees and asylum seekers in Indonesia, and about half are of Afghan origin. While they await resettlement, refugees cannot work in Indonesia, and there are limited options for refugee children in local schools. Determined not to lose hope, a group of refugees in Puncak scraped together resources to start a school, the Refugee Learning Center, or RLC for short. It offered basic education classes for children and youth, as well as skill training for adults. RLC depended heavily on donations and volunteers to operate. When OBW told RLC's story in 2019, they had many refugee students to support, but few resources, including volunteers. After OBW told the story, offers of help streamed in. 276 volunteers signed up with RLC to teach or contribute their skills. It was the most volunteers the center ever saw. RLC also received donations and achieved their fundraising target. With more resources and volunteers, RLC started basic computer and digital literacy classes, working off donated laptops to help bridge the digital divide. This is just one example of how our Better World stories leverage technology to promote inclusiveness in volunteering, to connect communities and inspire collective actions globally. 2 years ago, our world changed again with COVID-19. The pandemic accelerated digitalization, but also widened the gap between those who access, use, and benefit from technology and those who do not. Here are some actions we took to help improve digital access and make our Train the Trainer capacity projects more inclusive and accessible for the local communities and volunteers. Firstly, internet data allowance was provided to all participants to address cost and data usage concerns. Taking advantage of Zoom's language interpretation feature, volunteers and participants from even the more rural regions could interact without language barriers and create an environment of active learning and participation. With this, we could even organize a trilingual webinar with early childhood educators from Singapore, Japan, and Indonesia. All online sessions were recorded in the local language to enable on-demand access, ensuring that participants could learn and relearn at a time that's suitable for them or when they get internet access. YouTube's automatic transcription and translation features allowed participants to learn from videos produced almost anywhere in the world with subtitles in their local language. Notably, the pandemic also underscored inequalities in digital literacy. Beyond the pandemic, with the digitalization of work and employment, digital competency will not only be an important economic enabler, but also a social equalizer, especially for the workforce in developing economies. The digital divide in Southeast Asia, one of the many regions facing this technological imbalance, coupled with the pandemic that laid bare the extent of the divide, has spurred SIF to launch several programs to train people in various digital competencies. For instance, we piloted Climate Hack earlier this year. Climate Hack is a virtual hackathon leveraging technology and international networks to innovate for climate change. We brought together Singapore and international volunteers from the digital sector and 500 youth from across Asia in a 3-month-long digital upskilling program. After 3 months of coding, design thinking, and user experience training, the youth developed nearly 50 prototypes to combat climate change in their countries. Climate Hack marks SIF's first foray into e-volunteering as we navigate the new normal in international cooperation for development. Its success spurred us to develop a more comprehensive and inclusive e-volunteering program called Digilabs. Digilabs aims to upskill the young workforce in Asia with the right digital competencies to succeed in a post-COVID world. E-volunteers will share knowledge and mentor participants in the 4 learning tracks. Digilabs will also feature an online platform to allow increased accessibility, flexibility, and interactivity for learning and networking. And to ensure longevity of the program, a community of digital champions will be fostered and supported to accelerate digital literacy and inclusion in their countries, building more digital-ready societies. It is not enough for us to come out of this crisis looking the same as we went into the crisis. COVID-19 has presented us with the reason and opportunity to build back better and more inclusive for our local communities and volunteers alike. I hope my presentation has given you some insights on how technology can promote inclusiveness in volunteering, build strong relationships, and overcome digital accessibility challenges. Do connect with us through your preferred media channels and join us in making friends for a better world. Thank you very much for all your attention, and I look forward to learning from all of you through the rest of the conference.
Thank you so much, Lynette, for that thoughtful presentation. And it now gives me great pleasure to turn us over to JJ and Vanessa for their words.
Hello, my name is JJ DeBella, and I'm the Chief of Programming and Training in the Africa region at the Peace Corps. Today, my colleague Vanessa and I will be sharing with you our experience piloting virtual service at the Peace Corps and what we've learned over the past year. Peace Corps is a US government-funded agency with a grand mission focused on promoting world peace and friendship, and has 3 goals focused on capacity building and intercultural exchange. For over 60 years, our work has been guided by this mission and goals, doing most of our work in person. And like many of us, in 2020, everything changed. On March 15th, 2020, the Peace Corps director made the difficult decision to evacuate over 7,000 Peace Corps volunteers, Peace Corps response volunteers, and trainees. Like PCV, Paula Espina, who documented her experience via video highlighted here in the New Yorker magazine online, many volunteers were devastated to leave their work, counterparts, colleagues, friends, and countries they had made their home. Not long after the evacuation, a number of host country partners expressed their interest in finding a way to continue to work with the Peace Corps virtually. Additionally, the Peace Corps had been exploring the idea of creating a virtual service opportunity. And at the same time, many evacuees continued working with host country partners as evacuated RPCVs and expressed an interest in continuing their work in a more official capacity. As we decided to move forward in exploring virtual service, we also connected and learned together with Forum colleagues, including James O'Brien and Australian Aid, amongst others. From the beginning of the virtual service project, we have remained grounded and guided by our approach to development. It was of the utmost importance that we stay true to our values. We were also excited to see what virtual service could teach us. Our traditional service model is a 27-month program designed for generalists who work in country. 25 years ago, we added another shorter model entitled Peace Corps Response, designed for specialists who also work on site. The new virtual service pilot is distinct from Peace Corps Volunteer Service and Peace Corps Response Service. Participants contribute to the mission of the Peace Corps as private citizens while maintaining other personal commitments such as work and school. Virtual service pilot participants only engage virtually. Their terms of service include 12 to 27 week engagement, 5 to 15 hours of service per week. They must have access to their own hardware, software, and email accounts. And they're given up to $250 reimbursement for expenses and setup costs. In October 2020, 1 year ago, we launched our virtual service pilot. On the left, you see the first Peace Corps volunteers landing in Ghana over 60 years ago. And on the right, the first virtual service pilot participants who took another brave step by testing virtual service. The pilot tests the feasibility of virtual engagement while helping us keep our commitments to our partners. Over the last year, we grew to 27 countries with nearly 230 participants in total in all 6 of our Peace Corps sectors. In this third phase, we made these opportunities available to all returned Peace Corps volunteers and now have volunteers from every decade of Peace Corps' history coming back to serve virtually in their former countries of service. And now I'd like to hand it over to my colleague, Vanessa Dickey, who will share more examples of the virtual tasks that participants engaged in and what we're learning.
Thank you, JJ. Michaela, who you see on the screen on the left, spent 20 months working with the All Ukraine Association of People with Disabilities before she was evacuated. Now she hosts English classes via Zoom from her home in Oklahoma. On the right of your screen, you can see one of her students engaged in an English lesson. One of her students has been so inspired by her teaching that she has decided to become an English teacher herself. Tracy is a returned Peace Corps response volunteer who served for 7 months as an endangered species specialist, establishing a monitoring protocol and database for the Hunin giant frog. You can see a baby frog in her hand there in the picture on the left. She was eager to continue this effort after evacuation, and she was excited to become one of the first participants. In the picture on the right, you can see Tracy meeting with her counterparts and Peace Corps staff. Advocacy and data collection by Tracy and her partners led to the passing of a regulation that granted the reserve autonomy over the management and conservation of this frog. Trevor was in his second year of service working with a local NGO that supported people living with HIV and AIDS in Botswana when he was evacuated. During phase 1 of the pilot, Trevor worked with a local NGO to develop positive messaging around human rights and HIV prevention, such as the poster you see on the right that was produced to promote human rights for people living with HIV/AIDS. We asked participants and our host country staff to send in videos to show us what virtual service has meant to them, what it looks like, and what they're learning. We'd like to share a few of those videos with you now.
My name is Renalda. I'm the program manager for education at IVCO Kenya. I'm going to do a bit of narration on this video. This was a class on disability is not inability, just an empowerment class to grade 4 students.
هذا البرنامج هو فرصة باش نشاركوا المتطوعين السابقين اللي تم الترحيل ديالهم بعد إعلانات حالة الطوارئ بالمريض.
أنا باغا نتعلم اللغة الإنجليزية من خلال هذا البرنامج هذا إن شاء الله اللي غادي اللي قبلنا عليه.
Salamat sa Darba. My name is Katie, a returned Peace Corps volunteer from the Kyrgyz Republic. I've had such a great experience in VSP, and the sense of connection that I feel like I've been able to gain with my counterpart and our community has been super meaningful for me personally.
Conversation clubs have been an amazing experience to practice our English.
Language is a window into the culture. Mm-hmm. You'll never know everything about the culture, but language is a window into it.
We hope you enjoyed the highlight reel of virtual service experiences and reflections. We have been incredibly impressed by the innovative ways and adaptations that have been developed through this pilot. Behind every virtual service participant is a dedicated counterpart who dared to try something new. At the end of each engagement, we ask them to share their feedback with us. 86% of counterparts shared that they were satisfied or very satisfied with the virtual engagement. When we asked if the pilot met their expectations, one of the counterparts from Ukraine said, "More than that, I'm delighted this project is happening and that all the stakeholders demonstrate their genuine interest in improving it." Our host country staff, who, like many across the globe, have lost family members and social and professional connections, expressed how this pilot and the renewed connections with returned Peace Corps volunteers represents hope. Pictured here are the staff from Colombia and Kosovo welcoming their returned Peace Corps volunteers back to service and back to their countries. Now I'd like to share some results with you. When we interviewed participants at the end of their engagements, 73% of them shared that they accomplished most or all of their assigned tasks. We learned that cultural exchange is still an important aspect of service, even in this virtual space. And we learned that the engagements are periodic and asynchronous for the most part. This allows adaptation to partner and participant needs and access to technology. We started this presentation talking about the need to change due to COVID. But as we adapted and tried something new, we realized that this change had the potential to make us a more inclusive, nimble, and organization with greater reach. We reflected on the barriers to service, barriers to reaching the most vulnerable populations, who may be in places where we are unable to place an on-site volunteer due to safety and security concerns. And we explored barriers that exist for some Americans who want to serve but can't. We learned that we needed virtual service. It was an unmet, undiscovered need. Now that we have made the bold step to try something new, we are inspired to reflect further on how we can provide different opportunities for service and support our partners in more ways and to adapt to a changing world. In other words, virtual service has enabled us to fulfill our mission despite a global pandemic, reimagine where and how we serve partners, and provide opportunities for more Americans to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Dickie, for your insights. And now we'll hear from Willems.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Boudewijn Wijnands, founder and CEO of DeepMob. It is a great pleasure for me today to speak to you. I would like to speak to you about how we as DeepMob, a startup that started at the University of Oxford 4 years ago, how we see the future of volunteering in a new digital age and what this means for further development of volunteering across the globe. Please allow me to give you a brief presentation of how we see this future. For those people who do not know what DeepMob is, let me give you a brief introduction. DeepMob is a social tech company that produces volunteer platforms that does a couple of things. One, we match new innovative ways to match people to volunteer. Second, we activate them using lightweight CRM tools where not only volunteers and charities can work together, but also government institutions, companies, nonprofits, and volunteers. And third, we use analytics to improve the whole volunteering experience and thereby making extra impact across communities. This platform has been recognized by many prizes by the Bill & Melinda Gates Foundation and many other organizations across the globe. I mention this to give you a brief example of what we do, because it's not just DeepMob, but many municipalities, organizations across the globe that use our technology to improve their impact. And as you can see, you see on my screen here a couple of examples. Above, our own platform, the DeepMob community, below the city of Utrecht, and the other one, the city of The Hague on the right-hand side. The interesting thing is that all these local communities use their own platform in a digital manner, but all of these platforms are also connected to each other. So if a charity needs help in the city of Utrecht, it will be listed on the platform of the city of Utrecht, but it will also be listed on DeepMob and many other platforms as well, increasing the chance that this vacancy is filled. How do we see digitalization of volunteering then? Well, before we answer that question, let us look at some numbers. At the moment, our DeepMob community, and this includes all the different platforms that are being used in many different countries, with the whole community, we represent around 2.6 million volunteers. Over 10,500 charities, municipalities, volunteer centers, and corporations use the technology to use more volunteers and match them to do great things in communities, but at the same time, also activate them better as well. How can digitalization and technology help this new volunteering landscape? Well, to dive deeper into that, I would like to use 3 different case studies. First, we just went through all together, wherever you're living and wherever you're attending this conference, a very disruptive age of Corona. COVID, which disrupted many societies, locked people inside their homes, and even people that needed help in terms of quarantine. Therefore, DeepMob, with many of our partners, launched a couple of big platforms called Corona Helpers. This was an initiative where people across the world could ask for help and were linked to people that needed help. Concrete example, let's say your parents lived in a totally different city than you did and still needed help to get their medicine or needed grocery shopping. Volunteers living nearby those parents could help out and help them out in order for not to get hungry, or that they could get the medicines that they needed if the children of these parents could not travel themselves to this location because they were living too far away and maybe were in quarantine themselves. This initiative was a huge success. Corona Helpers was launched in the Netherlands and the UK and a couple of other countries as far as Barbados and India as well. These platforms not only help people in times of need when people were living far away, but it gives them also a platform to help in terms of loneliness, as people could do virtual volunteering and help them out by organizing Zoom or Teams calls, and that let those activities still go through even though people couldn't see themselves physically or meet in person due to the COVID restrictions that many in the countries across the globe were implementing. So this is a first example in times of a pandemic that even though technology could be used, people could still feel a human interaction, at least virtually, through Zoom, Teams meetings, and many different options as well. A second example was here in the Netherlands, in a province called Limburg, where we recently had many floods. Floods so severe that were hitting both the Netherlands, Belgium, and Germany, and that a lot of people were getting flooded in their homes and towns and their community. The province of Limburg used their technology to be able to help out, but also organize volunteering to help people get water out of their house, provide them with the necessary resources to be able to do so, but also keep track of analytics to see where floods were rising and where more help was needed. In just over 48 hours in this small region alone, 1,500 volunteers were recruited. They were recruited in the area, but also through the vast network of all the DeepMod platforms that were active in these communities. Today, the platforms don't need this help, of course, as luckily the floods have stopped. But in case a new flood would appear, these volunteers have already been mobilized. They are in groups, so they're ready, kind of like a reserve list of volunteers, that in a new floods or a different disaster, that a large group of people can be mobilized very quickly in order to help out, but also to organize them and structure them across the town and communities, so that the people, the first responders, who are of course the most important in helping out these communities, can at least get some additional volunteers in times of crisis. And this particular platform is set up for that, and digital tools have basically been set up in order to adequately help these local communities. Thirdly, a total different example that's more focusing on the second bit of the question about not just digitalization, but also how digitalization helps the volunteering in terms of development across the world. For this, we used an example by a charity called Kids Right, who uses our technology. Kids Right is an amazing organization that basically helps children in need across the world. And they have set up a State of Youth campaign, as you can see here in the screen behind me, is a State of Youth campaign where kids across the world can set up initiatives to help other children. Children that may want to help in education, might want to donate books, or other great campaigns that they are setting up to organize. This tool gives children, no matter where they are, from Asia to Africa to Europe to the US to Latin America and far beyond, the way to interact with one another, but also set up co-volunteering events, so that a child from maybe Liberia could work together with a child in Amsterdam, together with a child in the US, and all together set up a campaign in order for their world and their community to function better. And this includes as well many virtual volunteering activities that are always linked to video calls, but also by sharing different projects and teams and documents to be able to really create one world and one community. In short, technology can be used in many good ways to stimulate volunteering. It can help in terms of loneliness, but also in terms of getting ad hoc volunteers much more quicker in terms of a pandemic or in terms of floods. It can also help to get new groups of volunteers active. Thinking, for example, a lot of young volunteers who might not want to go to a physical office to find the new volunteering activities, but prefer to scroll down through their phones and find the volunteering activities that they look for. Third, online volunteering can also help by basically matching people that otherwise would not be matched. In the example of Kids Right, where a child in Africa could work together with a child in Europe and in the States to make together one common volunteering activity. It should be noted that even though digitalization and volunteering will spread much more, and virtual volunteering as well, we do not believe that online volunteering is the answer to offline questions. We can, for example, only solve loneliness by getting physical interactions and helping those people to feel less lonely, or volunteering offline and to change and also resolve many social impact challenges that are there in our local communities. But what digitalization volunteering can do is track the impact that has been made, match people in more effective ways, and maybe give them a better overview as well for organizations to see and know who those volunteers are to help out in specific questions that a charity might have. So we very much believe that online volunteering does not resolve the issues that are off the ground and local on the ground, but we do feel that it can facilitate local organizations much better to make the better decisions that are right for them, and technology can help with that. Thank you very much for your time. I hope that these brief 3 case studies have helped, and I very much look forward to answering any of your questions that you might have, and you can always reach out to us at hello@deepmol.com. Thank you very much for your time.
Again, much appreciated, Wins, and our final speaker will be Boyd.
I'm Stephanie Boyd, a Kyuso International volunteer with the Institute for Legal Defense in Peru. Since 2015, I've been working with Wainakana Kamatawarakana, the Kukama Women's Federation, on campaigns to protect their riverine culture. On September 8th, the women filed a legal action in a Peruvian court to declare the Marañón River a legal person, or a living being with rights, just like humans have rights. This is a major groundbreaking lawsuit in Peru and part of an international movement to protect the rights of rivers and the rights of nature. For many indigenous people around the world, like the Kukama, their river is not just a source of food, water, and transport. It's also the center of their spiritual universe. And here you see a painting by Luis Beltrán Pacaya, a Kukama indigenous artist who works with us, depicting the spirit universe beneath his river. It is led by the Carwara, which literally means people of the river in the Kukama indigenous language. But this spiritual universe and the river is threatened by modern developments like oil exploration, especially the past 40 years of repeated oil spills by Canadian, American, and European companies on the Marañón River. And that's why I feel a responsibility as a Canadian to work on this project. When the pandemic happened, we felt like our work was paralyzed. Our partners were devastated by COVID-19. Peru had one of the highest per capita death rates in the world during the pandemic, and the Amazon region was the epicenter of Peru's pandemic. It was literally a COVID war zone. I lost colleagues. Others fell gravely ill. Their family members were ill or passed away. All of my counterparts in the Amazon region had COVID at least once, many of them twice. In the face of this global emergency, Kyuso International provided me with a new volunteer post and funds to work with our partners digitally and virtually. This was crucial in helping Radio Kamara, an indigenous media outlet, and Wainakana Kamatawarakana, the Women's Federation that works with them, to set up an emergency response to the pandemic. Now, Kyuso International is a Canadian-based international development charity committed to ending poverty and inequality. It works with partners around the world to improve economic opportunities, enhance women's and girls' empowerment, and advance gender equality. Each year, Kyuso mobilizes hundreds of skilled professionals who volunteer their time and provide their knowledge. Kyuso is in its 60th year and its 57th year in Peru. It's currently working in 11 countries in Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, including Canada's north. Kyuso's support allowed us to set up a network of correspondents in isolated villages along the Marañón River. They would phone in weekly radio reports to Radio Kamara, reaching 70,000 potential listeners and allowing people to communicate along the river during the pandemic. They also sent me, in the Andean mountains of Peru, video images from their cell phones and small digital cameras. Working with the radio station director, Leonardo Cayo, a Kukama journalist, we were able to edit together a few short films, and I'd like to show you now a 3-minute clip from one of those films called 2 Demons and Many Amazon Communities at Risk. Let's watch the video.
Tamakichi sururi, 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 sururi. Tamakichi sururi, 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 sururi.
Como se dice en el Bajo Marañón, en la región Loreto de Perú.
las mujeres y hombres del río en una nueva lucha contra los demonios del COVID-19 y los demonios del Estado. Los sucesos de muerte y violencia en los pueblos de la Amazonía han desencadenado brutales pérdidas humanas y ganancias a terceros que se aprovechan, como a lo largo de la historia, de las circunstancias. Anoche he soñado que un pájaro volaba sobre el techo de mi casa y se paraba en la cumba allá arriba y se iba riéndose, ja, 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 y así volaba y se iba a otra casa. Mi mamá me decía en mi sueño que está llegando la muerte, que esa es la madre de la muerte, de la enfermedad, que tenemos que cerrar todo para que no entre y que no hay que dejarle parar ni en el techo, ni en la puerta, ni en el escalón de nuestras casas. Así me decía mi mamá en mi sueño. Papá, me dice mi hijo, ¿por qué has venido hoy más cansado y preocupado, papá? Ya son casi 3 meses que no puedo salir a jugar con mis amigos. ¿Qué está pasando? Dime, papá.
Ayúdenme, por favor. ¿Quién es el encargado de la ambulancia? Médicos, todos estamos enfermos. Hay algunos médicos graves. El hospital se está quedando sin médicos para atender a esta población que hoy sufre. Ayúdenos para poder evacuarnos, para que puedan estar en buen estado.
Todo se ha desbarrancado en el sistema de salud. Así se ha expuesto a médicos y pobladores que viven en las ciudades amazónicas y a la población que vive a orillas de los ríos en la región Loreto. 2 enemigos, 2 demonios, un COVID-19 que está matando a miles de personas y otro que juega la deshonestidad y la incapacidad. Ambos aliados en este desastre de muerte.
Pedimos a nuestras autoridades, pedimos que en verdad tomen conciencia para que nos vengan a apoyar. Nuestra población está muy preocupada sobre esta terrible enfermedad que es del COVID-19.
No sabemos lo que piensa un virus, pero sí lo que piensa y lo que no está haciendo el Estado peruano por su población. Su reacción cuando se trata de saquear las riquezas de la Amazonía es la misma, solo que cubiertas de promesas de desarrollo, pero detrás de sus acciones siempre la muerte.
The video was very important in raising awareness early on in the pandemic in Peru and around the world on what was happening in the Amazon region. It was shown on Ojo Público, a popular digital platform in Peru, with an article written by Leonardo, and the English subtitled version was in the New Internationalist magazine with one of my articles. It was shown in international festivals and won an award at a Guatemalan festival. And I'd like to say that Leonardo, our Kukama journalist, was the director of the film. So that means it's his baby. We had a lot of difficulties making the film together, weak Wi-Fi signals in the Amazon, weak Wi-Fi signals in the Andean region where I'm working. If it rained in either area, we might be completely cut off. Our partners were also at continual risk. One morning when we were editing, Leonardo was interrupted 3 times by phone calls saying that 3 different friends had passed away in those moments from COVID. Kyuso support also allowed us to continue our long-term work with the Women's Federation on their dream of filing this lawsuit to protect the Marañón River. We had to hold many virtual workshops with the women leaders and leaders from local communities in order to devise this lawsuit and make sure that it was really participatory and that they were leading the way, that this was reflecting their culture, their beliefs, and their ideas. So here you see Mary Luz with the microphone speaking to us, her legal and media advisors on the big screen that was set up in a local church in one of the main villages, and the leaders all traveled from their different villages to be there. Wainakona represents 28 communities along the Marañón River with more than 7,000 Kukama people. all in living in very isolated conditions. So the women had never had smartphones before. We trained them in the use of WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, and Zoom, so that they could then be in touch with each other as well as in touch with their legal advisors in Lima. And they also had legal advisors in Canada and the US that I was able to bring into the project to provide them with the international perspective for their lawsuit. The women became so proficient at organizing with each other and with all of their advisors that a few weeks ago, when there was a global blackout of WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger, Mary Luz phoned me in a panic saying, "Señorita, what can I do? We absolutely need WhatsApp in order to organize this press conference we're working on to announce the lawsuit." And luckily, everyone was able to get back online within a day, and the women's dream of holding the virtual press conference after filing their lawsuit was realized on October 7th. We see the board members of Wainakana arriving in the district capital of Nauta to give their press conference. And here you have Emilson Flores speaking to the world from the auditorium of Radio Camara. She's being recorded on a laptop with a camera, and she's got a microphone on. And on the big screen there, you see Maritza Quispe, the moderator and a lawyer from the Legal Defense Institute, who was moderating the event. The event was live in Radio Camara's auditorium, so you had about 30 guests socially distanced, including the local press. And on the big screen, you had speakers from 2 Canadian lawyers, a lawyer in Washington, D.C., an activist from International Rivers in California, and 3 of the Wainakana board members, and 2 very, very tired and stressed technical support members, including myself, monitoring everything on Zoom and Facebook Live. So there you see Emilson talking to the camera, and here is how she appeared on our Facebook Live press conference. We had more than 70 people watching the event, including journalists, and the recording remains online for anyone to watch. So if you missed the live event, this is the benefit. You can then go in and watch it on Facebook Live. We promoted it very heavily, and just 4 days after the press conference, we already had more than 2,000 views of it. There was coverage in local, national, and international media, including an article in EFE, which is the largest Spanish language news agency in the world. The articles are picked up in Spanish publications around the world. There's already been one in a newspaper in Panama, in Ola in the US, in the United States. Correspondents have been expressed interest from major publications like Time, the Washington Post, and the Guardian, and alternative publications as well. So the diffusion, the outreach work continues. What is the future of digital technology? Now that we see the pandemic hopefully ending? I think the future is rooted in the past. We need to use this digital technology to work with our Indigenous partners to protect their culture and their environment, but we cannot forget their cultural traditions. We began doing art workshops with the children along the river, and here you see them painting and drawing beautiful images of the spirit world and the natural world on their river. We don't want to lose that. Digital technology is a tool. It can't replace our need for human contact. Here I am with Mary Luz on the river. I miss her dearly and I want to get back. So we need to go back there. We need hugs. Here you see my co-director, Miguel Arauz, with Leonardo Tello, the director of the short film you watched prior to the pandemic. We want to go back there and be working with them in person, because we're human beings. We are not machines, we have emotions. So until we meet again in person, to my Kukama partners, we are on our way. And to all of you, I'd like to say, please join us on the river. This whole project is part of a documentary film that we have been working on for the past 7 years, all together, all participatory with the Kukama Women's Federation and the radio station. You can please go on our webpage, www.karwada.com, where you can watch shorts, where you can watch read excerpts from the books, see the artwork, read about the lawsuits. Please share the information widely. Thank you, Utsur Paki, to all of the organizers of this event for letting me connect with you. Ciao.
Thank you again to all our speakers, and we will now turn it over to some questions and answers in a moderated session. Welcome again live to our session on digitalization and the future of volunteering for development. We have about 30 minutes for questions and answers. And I want to again thank our speakers, Lynette, JJ, Vanessa, Badouin, and Stephanie for their informative presentations. Again, my name is David Stiers, and I am the representative for volunteers at the United Nations and coordinator of the Volunteer Groups Alliance, which is a global coalition of more than 70 organizations that contribute to sustainable development through volunteering. And we are collecting and sharing volunteer stories and how volunteers are delivering the SDGs at www.volunteergroupsalliance.org. So please feel free to share your stories with us. Again, thank you for joining us today for this session on our sub-theme of digitalization. And please feel free to type your questions in the Q&A box or press the Ask to Share Audio and Video button to join us on screen to ask your question. And we have heard how technology has really opened up new pathways for volunteering organizations, really enabling a quantitative increase in volunteer opportunities, and how internet-based tools have been developed to recruit and support traditional forms of international volunteering and develop new forms of volunteering. You know, this transformation, though many years in the making, has, as we've heard, been accelerated with the COVID-19 pandemic in the past 18 months. And we know that in the Global Volunteer Standard, the standards around managing volunteers apply not only to local, national, and international volunteers, but to virtual or e-volunteers as well. So we want to ensure that everyone has the best volunteer journey for all volunteers. So again, I welcome our panel, and we have questions coming in. And not surprising, many of the questions are dealing with the internet. And so this is for anyone who would like to answer about with this digitalization. How are your organizations advocating and prioritizing better access to the internet around the world so that volunteers everywhere can take advantage of these virtual opportunities?
Definitely, we know that digital does not work everywhere. But what we have seen and what we are trying to do is that we are trying to show through our projects and through our online workshops that firstly, going online is not, barring the infrastructure difficulties, capability-wise, it's not so difficult. So for example, through our online workshops, we have showed how we can actually use easy-to-use and free apps and tools, and how we can make content on demand in the local language. And all of this actually is already a way of sharing knowledge virtually. And what we have seen as an advantage of our workshops is also how our participants have not only learned the content, but also how online trainings are being conducted, and they realize that it's not so difficult actually as it may seem. And they also learned how to use new apps and tools. And what we believe is that they will then be able to be more able to adapt and contextualize the material and the method of delivery to share the learnings further with their peers within their local communities and association. And this way of sharing may or may not be online or digital, but they will be able to contextualize and adapt to how best to share this material. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much, Lynette. And Joseph has written that the internet seems to be the most democratic, symmetrical, and equitable instrument to overcome colonism. But in fact, it has a huge neo-colonial impact. So how do we decolonize the internet? Again, how do we advocate to make better access to the internet? Any other thoughts around this question from any of the other panelists?
I could maybe, can you hear me?
Yes, Stephanie.
Okay, great. I think that's a really important question. It's something that we deal with all the time in Peru. And I noticed the difference with people that we work with, activists in North America and Europe, where there's more of a debate about the ethical issues of using Facebook and other applications. In Latin America and in Peru, the internet applications like Facebook and WhatsApp that are more controversial in other parts of the world are really being used on the ground by activists because they are seen and they are being used as democratic tools. So in countries like Peru, where the mainstream media is censored and people don't have a voice, people don't have a way to get into the mainstream media, they really have managed to use the internet as a way to decolonize. So we're seeing that happening here. And I think that these types of events like IVCO, where we're able to share our experiences from around the world, are one of the ways that we're all advocating for more digital access and use of digital technology, because we're sharing the experiences of what's really happening in our different realities on the ground.
Great. Thank you, Stephanie. Yeah, go ahead, JJ.
Sure, I can add to that. And Joseph, I applaud the question because that's just a massive question. It feels really big and hard to get our hands around. But so I want to say, yeah, I'm reflecting on that question with you. The previous question, though, was talking a bit about the advocating for the internet and people's access around the world. I think what virtual service is teaching us is that people want to connect virtually. Our partners have that need and have requested it. So our approach to development is based on the needs of our partners. So I think the more we hear that from partners, the more we will find ways to advocate and be able to support that need as we hear it more globally. I think a big part about virtual service that is really interesting is that we found that it provided a way for our staff, volunteers, and partners to reconnect during COVID. And Stephanie, I heard you talking about this a bit at the end of your presentation as well, where you were talking about the connection and the physical connection. But we also found that the internet is a great tool for intercultural exchange and connection and seeing one another, which I think when we talk about the larger theme of the conference of inclusion and having all voices heard and directionality and all of that, a big part of that is seeing each other, valuing each other's experiences, and connecting. So the internet's one way that we do that. And so I think we will have to continue to advocate for people to have access to it. But it's really underpinning, I think, a really human need for all of us to be seen and heard and have agency over our future.
Great. Thank you, JJ. Maybe a question for you and Vanessa. You mentioned that your work on the Peace Corps' new virtual service pilot is a pilot to test the feasibility of virtual service. Does the U.S. Peace Corps have plans to continue and build on this experience?
Happy to jump in. Yeah, so we are now 1 year into the pilot and we are continuing. What's happening is that in our first phase, there were 9 countries that said, okay, we'll try it. We'll reach out to our partners and experiment. And based on the success of those in those 9 countries and with 45 participants, another 11 countries came to us and said, but we want to join now. And now we're in 27 countries. And so after that, we continue to collect information from the partners and from the participants, and learning that there is so much to be gained from this virtual connection. And the latest information that we got from our post is there are now 50 countries that want to participate. So we're continuing to expand and build on the learning that we have from the first 3 phases. And the next phase we will be implementing over the next year. And then the agency is actually exploring the possibility of making this a permanent program. There's a lot that we need to do to make that happen. A Peace Corps volunteer is a particular thing. It's someone who's on site for 2 years, or if it's a Peace Corps response volunteer, they're on site for between 6 and 12 months. So to make a virtual volunteer and make that an official type of volunteering in our agency, there are legislative changes that need to take place. And so that's why I say we're still exploring it, but we're definitely going to be continuing this pilot, because what we learned through the first few phases, actually in this last phase particularly, is that there's an unmet need among our RPCV, our returned Peace Corps volunteer community, to re-engage and continue service. So there are volunteers that have served in the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and they have now had a full career, and they want to give back to their country of service, or give back and serve our mission. So in this 3rd phase, we now have returned Peace Corps volunteers from every decade of Peace Corps, and we're learning from that experience, that return to service. But there were so many more who emailed us and said, I don't qualify for any of these engagements, but I'm really interested in engaging. So we feel like there's demand from the partner side, from our countries, our host countries, and from participants or our returned Peace Corps volunteers. So we want to continue to meet that demand.
That's great. I love the idea of the volunteers in development can continue their work even when they're not in country, or maybe years after they were in country as well.
Mm-hmm.
Another question's come in for Aji about what are the risks of the emergence of an e-voluntourism with the development of large digital platform for e-volunteering? What are the safeguards to avoid abuses and ensure impact? And I know we don't have anyone specializing in e-voluntourism on this panel, but just within your own program and work, if you have any ideas about e-voluntourism, or how are you in your own e-volunteering work safeguarding to avoid any abuses and ensure impact around the work that you're doing?
Maybe I could start.
Great, thank you, Stephanie.
I think it helped a lot that in my personal case, because I am a volunteer, that I had already been working with our partners in the past. And so that made it a lot easier for me, because I had already had that contact with them and we'd already set the groundwork. So we were able to just keep going. It's more of a challenge when you just start working from zero and you don't know anyone. And we actually had an e-volunteer before the pandemic working with our project, and it was very difficult for her to, it was difficult for us as well to get her into the project and make her feel part of it, because we'd never met her. She was on the other side of the continent. There were time change differences. And when someone's just not there, it's hard to bring them into the project. Even just, the work that she's doing and us evaluating it and monitoring it and getting back to her was more of a challenge than if you have somebody right in the office right beside you. It's not impossible, but it is more of a challenge. I liked what Vanessa said about returning volunteers, because going back to their country of service, because then they've got that connection already, so it's easier for them to just jump in. So I think that's something to explore for the future. And the e-volunteer that we had was actually working on a web page. So we had someone doing digital technology digitally, remotely. And so that's why in the end, it did all work out, and she was able to do the technical part of our web page.
Great, thank you, Stephanie. Another question that I'd love to hear you address is around any specific examples of how your virtual engagements are enabling you to reach areas that were previously inaccessible to on-site volunteers. So how have you been able to expand your volunteer impact through these virtual engagements that maybe the on-site volunteers were limited in? So I'd love any thoughts you've had about that volunteer engagement expansion.
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. In our current implementation in Paraguay, for example, there's in the northern part of the country, there's an area that has been off limits to on-site volunteers because of safety and security concerns. And those partners have reached out to us over the years, every year requesting a volunteer to go back to that area where we had volunteers previously, and we haven't been able to place them there. But through this virtual engagement, they reached out to us again and said that they were doing a radio program to educate the population about some environmental projects, and they engage returned Peace Corps volunteers in this radio program. So we currently have multiple participants helping the radio program in Paraguay to educate people about a particular protected land there in northern Paraguay. In the Philippines, they're exploring now returning to an area that they haven't been in many years, again, for safety and security reasons. In Peru, they're now able to explore new partnerships in an area of Peru where we haven't previously placed volunteers, also for some access and security concerns. So this is really enabling us to help in communities where we might have some of the most vulnerable populations, but because of our strict protocols around safety and security, we're not able to place volunteers on the ground.
Great. Any other ways that you've been able to increase your volunteer work through virtual engagements beyond what you've been able to do on site? And another thing to think about, are there any ways that these virtual engagements are addressing barriers to service for those who want to serve, and allowing more people to be volunteering that might not be able to also be on site as well?
Yeah, so I'd like to share as well. So virtual engagements, virtual events has definitely allowed us to reach areas that were previously inaccessible. So for example, in Southeast Asia, we know that languages across the different countries are very, very different. Almost every country speaks a different local language in Southeast Asia. So for example, the webinars that we have organized and technology has allowed us to hold these webinars online with interpretation in the local language. This has really allowed our volunteers to increase their reach by manyfold. Firstly, because they could reach, for example, our early childhood webinar could reach early childhood educators staying in the more rural parts of Indonesia. And they could also deliver or share very, very pertinent and very timely, relevant topics, for example, on how to open a preschool safely during the COVID period. And encouraged by that, we also organized short virtual sessions on other topics that the participants had asked for example, how to conduct online learning for young children. And we have also seen how our volunteers have been very thrilled to be able to connect live with their peers in the more remote parts of Indonesia. And even, like I mentioned in my presentation, that when we had a trilingual webinar, we could even connect with early childhood educators in Japan, Singapore, Indonesia, really breaking the barriers of language. And I would say virtual engagements have also allowed us to be more nimble in meeting the needs of our partners. So previously, when we were having face-to-face workshops, when a new topic was requested, for example, we might say, okay, we'll incorporate it into the next workshop, which would likely be maybe 6 months later, because that's when the volunteers would fly over again. But now, as long as we can align the schedules of volunteers and participants, we can very quickly organize a short sharing session, and the knowledge shared can be put into use immediately. So yeah, we definitely feel like virtual engagements have allowed us to access areas that were previously we couldn't reach as efficiently.
Great, thank you, Lynette. We have only about 7 more minutes left, so if you do have any other final questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A or feel free to join us on screen. But I'd love to ask the panelists, what sort of any final words or key takeaways you would like the audience to leave with today around this topic of digitalization, and particularly thinking about the future based on so much that's happened in the past 18 months. Where might you see the next 18 months or the next several years as we continue to advance in our e-volunteerism work?
Good morning, David. Maybe I can add on to that point.
Please,
Hi,
good.
everyone. Yeah, Boudewijn, founder of DeepMob. And first of all, major apologies for being late. I think a factor of an hour time difference between Amsterdam and Athens, where it was not booked correctly by my secretary, plus a broken train, as you could see in my background, led at least to be delayed. So major apologies for that. But if you allow me, David, to maybe at least give our perspective on that. And thank you for taking the time to seeing our presentation. Is that at least what we see across the globe, and our technology is used now in 17 different countries, so that is 17. We see very much a demand as well for cooperating together. So different parties willing to cooperate in order to resolve a particular social issue on the ground via volunteering. Meaning that a corporate works together with students, together with more volunteers who might be on pension, that different parties want to cooperate. And of course, digitalization has helped hugely. And a great example I can give is that we're launching in a remote island of St. Martin in the Caribbean, which have a group of volunteers living there, very active, but they lack the resources of additional help from, let's say, European countries or America, where big corporates might, who will go on vacation there, could help out as well on a structural basis via Zoom. And I think that's a very interesting trend, that all those resources that are out there of people who want to commit time and to resolve and help society can. And I think that's a very interesting perspective, not just in the country, but also out the country.
Thanks so much, Brendan. Any other final words or comments? Yes, Jake.
I just want to underscore what Lynette had shared about the translation and applaud that work. We also think that's really important. We have language cross-cultural facilitators on our staff. And it's something I kind of want to challenge us to think beyond our programs, but even how we function virtually with our staff globally. And one of the things we've started doing is having translation in our staff meetings, our global staff meetings. So in using the Zoom technology. And that has also helped connect us as a team. So everyone can really understand and enjoy our staff meetings as well. And this is more for like the larger Peace Corps community. So I heard in the earlier session some conversations about, we have all these sessions in English, and how is that inclusive? So Lynette, I just applaud that and want to say we're trying to do that as well, and would appreciate hearing any practices that you have maybe after the session that you could share with us.
I just wanted, as a final word, to say that Digital technology is a tool. It's not a replacement for the issues that we've all been working on in the volunteering community over the years. It can't replace human contact, so we need to use it and incorporate it with the actual human work that we're doing, and not forget that a lot of our partners, especially in the global South, need that human contact. They don't know who we are. There's a lot of mistrust. It's not like in Europe, where I think that the Netherlands example was amazing of how people, got together during COVID and helped each other out. Peru is a totally different reality. You need to work with people over time in order to establish bonds of trust. So you need to look at the different cultural realities in the countries where we're all working in order to see what fits best with digital technology.
Great. Thanks, Stephanie. Lynette?
Yeah, I would like to just add on to what Stephanie mentioned as well. So for us, like I mentioned a little bit in my presentation, digital literacy is something in an area that we really feel like we can, that Southeast Asia really needs, and that is also why we are starting an e-volunteering project, or rather starting e-volunteering initiatives in this area to also ensure that our partner communities gain the skill sets they need to survive and to thrive in this digital era that's coming up. And so I would say internet is definitely a tool that really helps us do this, and we should really think about how we can leverage this to better meet the needs of our partner communities.
Great, thank you, Lynette. And Vanessa, any closing thoughts?
I think some people have one view of what virtual engagement could be, and the video did show that it starts off with one of our participants who was teaching a class in sign with a deaf school in Kenya. And you can just see the faces of the students lit up as she was teaching them. She was teaching them about a story in a book. And then it went on to move forward to our engagement in Morocco, where we were working with a local radio program to educate youth, and then also to teach baking skills to another youth club. So I think there's just so many different ways that we can engage virtually, and it's really limitless because it's the creativity of our partners. And related to the question about the internet, I feel like our partners are teaching us how to do this because they know the context and they have found all the platforms and tools, and they're really teaching our participants and us how to engage and how to use the internet effectively. So I just think it's such an amazing creative learning space, this virtual environment. I agree that we all need the in-person connection. I certainly miss it myself. But I think there's just so much more we can do with this.
Absolutely. And again, I want to thank Jennifer, Vanessa, Lynette, Stephanie, and Benjamin for your wonderful presentations today. And as we come to the end of our session, I want to encourage our audience to complete the evaluation in the poll. And the IVCO 2021 introductory paper on the 44 questions about inclusive volunteering for global equality. If you haven't looked at it yet, I encourage you to do so because it does have 8 questions of the 44 about digitalization on page 4. And we have heard today, digitalization is a major advance in volunteering and development. And I'll close with the last question from the paper about the persistence of the digital divide, which we opened our Q&A with. How can gaps in connectivity and a lack of digital literacy be overcome to achieve an inclusive digitalization of volunteering? So as we look forward to IVCO 2022 in Senegal, I am excited to hear about others' efforts and actions to address this question, and also your continued work of engaging e-volunteers around the world. And again, thank you all for being with us today. Thank you again to our panelists, and I wish everyone a great rest of the conference. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.